Welcome back to the Umucha podcast with Dydine Umunyana and Alex Anderson, the podcast where we explore different cultures with people from all around the world.
Today we're talking with Therese, Dr. Therese Mascardo, about mental health and therapy in different parts of the world, especially during this quarantine and the pandemic.
It's definitely a must listen to, especially all of us need to hear from a mental health expert, and oh my, she is so amazing, and she brings relatability to our communities, to mental health experts and people from all over the world. She's in Portugal and she's American, Filipino American. What amazing combination. Like, this interview was just amazing.
Absolutely. And very soul nourishing for sure.
Yeah, we talked a lot. It was more of a conversation, and we actually got to talk to a therapist, you know?
Yeah, it was. There was therapy in a way.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we hope you enjoy listening to this episode. So, you were born in Santa Monica, right? Is that correct?
I'm from Southern California,
Okay,
but
yeah.
I was born in Orange County, just
Orange
south of Santa Monica, just south of LA.
Okay. Great. Okay. Well, I'm from Texas, from Dallas, and I just moved to LA, 2 years ago, 2018. So this is all sort of new to me. But what was kind of like your upbringing in, Southern California, Orange County?
Yeah, so I grew up. I'm Filipino American. I was born in Garden Grove, which is just a little kind of suburb town in Orange County, and spent most of my life growing up in the city of Orange. So yes, there's a city named Orange in Orange County.
I know.
Orange County.
Wow.
And it was a really interesting place to grow up, because I would say the high school that I went to, half of that high school was folks who were pretty poor, and a lot of Mexican immigrants, probably about half the school.
Yeah.
And the other half was, I'd say, mostly white with a tiny smattering of Asian, and I think there were like one or two black kids in the school. And most of a good portion of that crew was typically somewhat upper middle class or wealthy. So it was a very strange mix of two cultures. And just down the street, right, at the rival high school, Villa Park, they were the school that was in the middle of like the wealthiest part of town. So they were like always making fun of the El Medina kids for being on that side of town and that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, growing up where I grew up was, I think, really a good thing in some ways, because my primary experience, I was privileged enough to grow up where it was safe. I didn't think a lot about, or I didn't realize much about any of the violence or gang stuff that was going on. And so, I was able to focus on being a good student and being involved in extracurricular activities. And I didn't have to worry about kind of my day-to-day survival. So I really appreciated growing up in that environment, because I think sometimes kids who grow up with a lot of wealth and privilege actually have a lot to overcome themselves, because the world sees them as having a lot of financial wealth and resources. Yeah. But, sometimes they grow up feeling like they have a lot to prove, or that their worth is only in their financial wealth. Right. And, they have, I'm not trying to say like, oh, poor rich kids or anything. They have a lot of privileges, but I think my high school experience kind of kept me with like a good head on my shoulders. I didn't think too high of myself, but, and also, I guess I didn't feel like there was a lot of thinking you were better than other people, which was good.
That also sounds like good parenting.
Yeah. That also comes from your parents as well, like to give you that enough confidence to survive in the world, but also to not feel like you are,
I'll give them all the credit in the world. My parents are great, and in many ways they're hilariously stereotypical Filipino parents who were immigrant. So my options growing up were I could be a doctor or a lawyer. That was it.
That was the options, and you became a doctor.
I was like the rebel. I
You were
became
a
a
good
psychologist,
kid.
but there's still a doctor title, which my mom still uses when she sends me mail. She always addresses it to Dr.
Oh,
Therese.
I love that.
So,
She's proud.
She is proud.
I think it's her degree, actually.
Aw.
But yeah, no, they did a great job. My parents were quite religious. They were very Catholic. And so I remember growing up learning a lot of great values, like serving people. I remember we used to go to soup kitchens and we would go to Mexico and help build houses. And that was just really woven into the fabric of my upbringing was you take care of people, you serve, you give when you can, generosity, kindness, all those good things.
Yeah.
People are amazing. And when we take the time to actually listen to each other's stories, it's such a connecting experience. And one of my favorite storytelling accounts on Instagram, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's called Humans of New York. Are you guys familiar with that account?
You're not. I am. I love that. Yes.
It's so good. It's basically a photographer who interviews people on the street and asks them questions about their life. And the stories that are shared through this account are just, I mean, they bring me to tears almost every day when I see something. And, you know, all walks of life, and just realizing that we're all truly human. We all, you know, have hunger. We all want to be loved and feel like we belong. I mean, if you want to like connect to human beings, I recommend it highly if you don't follow Humans of New York.
Yeah, for sure.
I follow them. I will share.
Please do. Yeah, that sounds like what we're doing, but more of like a hands-on deal. Yeah, that's nice.
But all that to say, like this type of space is so needed, right? Because we tend to get so divided as people sometimes, and sometimes it feels like the world is getting so extreme in its viewpoints. And so I love things like this that give us a chance to reconnect to one another.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, thank you so much for, you know, being on our podcast. It's really an honor. I remember a while back when we were sharing our stories, I was still writing my book and I was super emotional. I remember it was after church and we were sharing our stories, and I remember you telling me your story about your brother, and that never left me. Like that was something that just like stayed with me, and realized we're all human. You know, we have pain, we have happiness, we have joy, we experience all these things the same. So yeah, I appreciate you. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that means so much that's, you know, that part of what I shared with you stuck with you.
What I really want to know is, what does the word culture, what does that mean to Therese? What does that mean?
I love this question. So I think that culture is the substance of our identities and our way of life. So that can be our beliefs, the way that we think, and the way that we feel, the language that we use to describe all those things. I also think it's the stories that we share and experiences we share, whether it's stories of triumph or stories of pain and heartache. I think when a group of people share those stories, it creates a culture. And then lastly, I would say, I think culture is also a set of values, sometimes values that aren't even spoken, but values that influence the way that we see the world and what we view as good and what we view as bad and what we view as everything in between.
Yeah.
And so I think culture is something that kind of dances and it takes those three things and kind of has them interwoven.
Yeah, that's I forgot, because we had done a discussion video. We recorded ourselves kind of talking about our journey, creating this podcast, and kind of our lives at the moment, being in quarantine and all that. And we got to discussing Umucho, which means culture, in Kinyarwanda. Yeah. And Dydine, you had said something, and I don't know if you actually remember it, but you said something about it being like more individualized.
Yeah, I was. I remember. It was more culture. It could be a society culture, but also in Rwanda, a word culture can be used for an individual's character. So your character, who you are as a person, who like like if you're like, I remember when we were kids, our parents would tell you, oh, you have a good culture, or parents as friends, or they would tell you that you have good culture, but it's the way your manners, the way you behave, all those things, and they will use it in a positive way. Like you have your own culture that you bring, to your society.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what
Oh my gosh, I love that. You have your own culture that you bring to your society. I love that because it kind of speaks to the power that we have as individuals to influence the world around us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I just got goosebumps actually when you said that.
Yeah.
Because it's very empowering. It's
It is
very
empowering.
empowering to think that we have a culture.
Yes, every person on earth, so the 7 billion people,
Right.
each individual has a culture that, if it's really a great culture, they can influence all of us. And that's,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And kind of like what you were saying about, I already forgot the name of the Instagram.
Humans of New York?
Yeah, Humans of New York. It's
Humans of New York, yes.
It's like everybody with their own culture, individualized, has their own story. And you can go up on the street in New York and just talk to them, and then they wow you with something very unique to themselves, which is their own story and their own culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And stories are kind of, I think, something that just it connects all of us as humans, right? Because we've all got stories to tell, and stories are probably the most compelling method of communication that we have as human beings, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Do you ever have any challenging moments relating to your own culture or faith? If so, how did you overcome it?
Or how do you
overcome
it
those
if
moments,
it is challenging?
if there's any challenging moments,
Gosh, I mean, how could you not, right? I think that's part of being human, is to have challenges within different cultural experiences. I mean, I think it depends on what parts of my identity we're talking about. Culturally, I identify as a Filipino American, and in my faith, I identify as a Christian, a follower of Christ.
Yes.
So Filipino American experience is one of growing up, as I mentioned, in Orange County. There weren't a lot of other Filipinos where I grew up. And so I felt often like an outsider.
Yeah.
And I think, so my primary experience was one of just feeling maybe a level of discomfort or disorientation when it came to my culture. In fact, I remember not really identifying as different culturally until I went to college. I went to UC Berkeley, which is a really diverse school,
Right.
and was getting involved in groups. And I had this like moment of like, oh, I'm a person that's like a culture, and it's not white, and it kind of, I experienced my culture differently when I went to university, as I think many people do. They really kind of claim their identity culturally. And then, so that was, I don't know if I described it as a challenge. It was more just like a part of the story. As a Christian, oh my gosh, when do I not have challenges within my faith? I mean, the thing about the Christian faith is there are so many different ways of being a follower of Christ. Or let me say that differently. There are so many different ways that people practice their faith as a follower of Christ. And, there's a lot of disagreements, people seeing things all sorts of different ways they can't agree on. And so, there are lots of times where I'll see, like a recent example is there was a pastor who was defying social distancing rules in his state so that he could have church, and putting all these congregants' lives at risk, with the notion that like their faith was going to be all they needed. Right. And when I see stuff like that, it's discouraging because I also know a ton of Christians who are incredibly educated, who are great members of society and contributing and all that sort of thing. And so, it's hard sometimes when I see that Christianity becomes perhaps more politically aligned than aligned to truly the values of what it means to follow Jesus.
Yes.
But, I think Jesus knew we were all going to disagree a lot, and he gave us some guidelines for how to navigate that.
Right.
And, I'm just like everyone else. I think for me, my faith is something that's life giving to me. But I have my days, where it doesn't connect with me, or, I struggle with trying to understand something or whatnot. So I would say, I definitely have my share of challenges, and I think I just try to take it one day at a time, honestly.
That's the way.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, that's kind of all you can do. I mean, you can only take it one day at a time, one step at a time,
and educate yourself as much as you can about not just follow blindly. Like, even if you're in that church and the pastor says this, you still have your own brain to to navigate what's going on. Yeah.
I mean, you nailed it. And I think you just reminded me, Dydine, that like one of the things I really value is wisdom, the value of wisdom. And I want to be wise. And one of my sources of wisdom is mentorship. I really value having mentors, looking up to people who have walked further down the road I'm walking down, and asking for their insight. Because why wouldn't I? It's like getting to cheat, right? It's like, hey, what's around that corner? What do I need to be ready for? So I love seeking wisdom from people I respect and want to learn from, and getting educated, because I do think it empowers us and prevents us from acting stupid.
So you're in Lisbon right now? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, so
how do you say it again in Portuguese?
Lisbon, or in Portuguese it's Lisboa.
Lisboa. That's what I like most. So
you guys are saying great.
So why are you there? And would it have anything to do with work, with therapy? We want to talk a little bit about
Therese.
With Therese,
Yeah, you guys got it. Yeah. So, for those who are listening who aren't familiar with my work, I'm a clinical psychologist. And a few years ago, I decided to take my practice fully online, which was not really widely practiced. But it was really out of hope that I could have kind of a different kind of life, because the life I was living was one where I was having to count every single vacation day. And it was so limiting to feel like I couldn't just have the freedom to go where I wanted to go, when I wanted to go somewhere. And then the other reality for a lot of psychologists too is when we work in private practice, if we take vacation, we don't make any money. So it was like, I felt like a lose-lose, in some ways, and just very restrictive.
Yes.
So I decided shortly after I turned 35, I had kind of a 35 life crisis. And I decided to just go for something I'd always wanted to do, which was to live abroad, and specifically in Europe. So I picked Lisbon kind of in a very random way, to be honest with you. I wish I could tell you I had some really systematic plan, but I researched a little bit in terms of countries that would be a relatively smooth transition to living as an American. And Portugal just seemed to have it all. I mean, great weather, affordable rent, and kind people who are more than willing to speak English.
I've seen all the food you share too.
What's that?
The food you share that you eat there, it's amazing.
Oh, the food. That's like, we need a whole other podcast talk about the food in Portugal. I mean, they've got amazing, amazing seafood, cheese, wine, everything.
Yeah.
It's kind of like California and Italy had a baby, but it's much more affordable to live here than in California.
Wow.
We should go to Lisbon.
And the colors, it's colorful. It's a colorful city, right?
I mean, the architecture is just beautiful. There's a lot of Parisian influence, but a lot of the buildings have just colored tiles in every single color, like Easter eggs, like pinks and yellows and blues and greens. And it's beautiful. I mean, and one thing they've done that's really great is they've made it a law that you can't change the architecture of the building on the outside, because they're trying to preserve the traditional look of the city. So it's really, really beautiful.
That's
really
and nice.
Essentially, I love Lisbon. You guys are just hearing about it. You've never been, right? But when I heard about it, I was like, I think I want to live there.
Yeah, you have no idea what's going on in my mind right now.
As soon as this quarantine's up.
Truly, it's like kind of my secret personal goal to get everybody to live here so I can build my own commune of people that I love. Yeah. It's an amazing place. And there's a lot of American expats that are moving here. But essentially, in 2018, I just wanted to try being an expat on Versailles. So I said, okay, 3 months. I'm going to do 3 months. I made plans to get everything covered back home so that, my life was taken care of. And I kind of did a test run of living as a digital nomad. And essentially, a digital nomad is someone who isn't tied to one place for work. So we can travel as we like. And I started in Lisbon. I had done some trips in Italy and other parts of Europe. But then I ended up really loving Lisbon. So I stay here a lot of the time, just because it feels like a second home.
It felt like another home, yeah.
But I'm so grateful because my work, since it's fully online, allows me to make my home wherever I want it to be.
Yeah.
So it's a very fun life to get to travel anytime I want to and go anywhere I want to and not have to take a pay cut just because I'm traveling.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's so rewarding to you, making that decision to take your work online, and then it ends up working out for you in a wonderful way.
I'm so grateful I can feed myself.
I know, I keep my head.
And in this day and age, I'm grateful. I don't know if any jobs are truly recession proof, but working in health, and working online means that my work hasn't really been that impacted by all of the quarantine stuff related to the coronavirus. So I'm extremely grateful for this life. And my personal motto is to build a life you don't need a vacation from. So that's what I try to do.
Yeah.
I know.
I've never heard it worded that way.
But I feel
that's
like
such a powerful thing, to build a life you don't need a vacation from.
Secretly, we were about to quit the job that we were working where we were, but don't tell anyone. Because we were like, I can't, we can't keep, building up our careers and not having a vacation. We're working 8 hours a day, and then you go home, you work another 4 hours on your career. And it's like, there's no rest. You work on the weekends, so you can, not, stop building your career. And it was so stressful that when this thing happened and they laid us off, I was like, thank God, this is a push. It's a push for us.
Right. You decided to kind of go with the wave instead of fight it.
It has worked out. We released more episodes that we never did before.
In the first week or maybe week and a half, we got more done on our projects that we had in the previous 5 months.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's actually really amazing, because the truth is, a lot of people are trying to be productive right now, but we're in the middle of a global crisis. So it's not anything I would expect from anyone.
Yeah.
And so just the fact that you have been able to try to take advantage of this time while it's extremely dramatic is great. I'm so glad you guys have been able to do that.
It really helped in a way of not being affected emotionally as much, or paying attention to all the negativities that are going around. Because we're you were doing something, if you want to garden. I love gardening, so I was doing all of that, and it helped for not feeling depressed or feeling like the world has stopped. It was kind of, not everyone can be able to do that, or even has the awareness that there's a possibility to switch your perspective, something like that. I mean, you probably know better because you're the one who's
you're right. It can be very difficult. Sometimes people, through no fault of their own, are just stuck in survival mode because that's what they have to do to put food on the table. And I know quite a few people like that.
Oh yeah.
But I can totally see how if you're privileged enough to be able to have the time to pour into a passion project and pour your energy into something that you can focus on, that gives you a sense of purpose, that is an amazing gift. And, I think it can be something big or small. This is really meaningful, obviously, having conversations that connect people. For me, some of my, energy has gone into just cooking, baking, all of that sort of stuff has been really therapeutic for me.
It is. Yeah. That's something you just mentioned about that families that cannot even put food on the table. So many billions probably, because the world, billion people that are on Earth, I don't think a million of them are like the rich, rich. They probably half of them don't even have, they don't have meals to put on the table. I'm from Rwanda, you know, so probably, yeah, more than 70% of the population there surviving every single day. So here in America as well, it's a wealthy country, but when you go to some places in the United States, you realize that, hey, it's actually not all,
Yeah,
you know,
sunshine and
it's not all
rainbows and-
sunshine and rainbows, you know,
Yeah.
and just being aware of all of that, and trying to do our best.
It's a rude awakening. I mean, I think, American culture, we're often raised with the sense that we are, Americans are extremely nationalistic, and in many ways
Oh,
that's
yeah.
really great to have
Yeah.
pride in your country and to see the best values in what it means to be an American. And one of those is that you see your country as the best country, and you
Yeah.
think, we're at the top of the list for everything.
Yeah.
We do everything the best. And I think, unfortunately, this virus has been a rude awakening that there's actually quite a few things where I think we have things that we can learn from other countries who are doing it really well. The poverty impact of what's going on is really concerning. I was just reading an article the other day that talked about the waves of hunger and poverty that are going to happen as a result of this crisis, because people like the folks you're talking about in Rwanda, I know, my parents' culture, the Philippines, there's a lot of poverty there. Here in Lisbon, even, middle-class folks who are working in tourism, are now having to go to food banks because they've lost their source of income. So it's a huge shift for millions of people. And, it's extremely, extremely concerning and humbling. And I think all of us who are in a position where we're still able to earn a living, I think we have a responsibility to look out for our fellow human beings right now.
So absolutely. Absolutely, we do. Yeah, that's so, thank you.
It's an important message.
I get a little emotional.
Well, it's an important message to share.
It's important for everyone to hear that. And, sometimes we have even too much, and then we're still affected by this. But I've learned at a very young age that when you give a little bit, you're actually giving to yourself as well.
Yeah.
So when you do that act of kindness, the act of giving to someone, the prayers they pray for you, and the little thing you give them, how much it meant for them, it's a blessing to you. And most of the time, it helps. It helps emotionally for that person who gives. So just knowing that, okay, if you give, you're actually not just giving, you're also receiving at the same time. It will probably help all of us, in the world.
Right. I mean, love is the most powerful thing we have in the world, and love is generative. So, I'm probably going to describe this terribly, but there's this notion, right, of energy and how energy can never disappear. It just changes its form.
Right.
And love is even more powerful, because love, you can take acts of love and they actually magnify and grow, right? Like one little act of love in a person can make their life even more great and allow them to love other people. And it just continues to magnify itself in these exponential ways. Yes. So I'm getting goosebumps again. I know, you're right. I mean, it's a generative force. And I think that's a hopeful thing to remember, because I think sometimes we think the little things that we can do, that you and I can do, feel small. Like, oh, I can only give $5 here, or I can only buy groceries for someone one time. But those acts are eternal.
It means the world for that person. And and one day if they make it, they would do it for somebody else. So that's the,
And we know that that's the case, right? We know that when people receive kindness, they're more likely to do kindness for others. We know that when they receive generosity, they're more likely to give and be generous. And so, absolutely, it's always a good investment to love on other people.
I know, it is a great investment. That's the best way of putting it. So you're investing. If you're loving people, you're investing in yourself.
I mean, with you having experienced all these different cultures and traveling as much as you have, and still kind of keeping like therapy and mental health in mind, talking to all these different people, and I can bring up my personal stories about this as well, but do you find that talking about mental health among different cultures is like welcome in some and maybe kind of frowned upon in others?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many cultures and I could give you a million different answers,
Yes.
but I'll give you kind of some general thoughts. I mean, if we're talking about therapy, like Western mental health, I really can't think of a culture outside of like mid upper class white Los Angeles or New York City that has really embraced actively working on mental health. But that's like a very limited view, right?
Yes.
So for example, one thing I'm noticing is that with millennials and Gen Z, they are as generations making mental health more of a priority, and I think you see it more openly discussed now. My favorite social media platform is Instagram, and I started my account 2 years ago when there were no therapists on Instagram, and now there's so many therapists.
I know, I've seen so many.
Conversations are so embraced. Like I'm so amazed when people share mental health-based posts and talk openly about their anxiety, and I'm really encouraged by that. So I think younger generations are really changing culture. And nowadays, people more often than not are starting to say mental health is just as important as physical health, and that we should make it a part of our daily self-care and our routine. Some cultures have, when we look at mental health as the parts of ourselves that are not our body, so our mind or our spirit, some cultures actually have really embraced that much better than Western culture. So, I don't have a ton of examples, but the one that comes to my mind is, one thing I have heard more recently was, in Native American culture, they have actually kind of a rich context for talking about spirit and mental health. And one of the examples was in Western culture, we have often stigmatized people who would identify as LGBTQ or have a non-binary identity. And Native Americans I think it was in Canada somewhere, First Nations folks, at a conference came up with the term in the early 90s of two-spirit, which is just an idea of talking about someone that sees that identifies with their gender differently. And it was a term that didn't carry the same stigma. It was a term, I think, of respect. And again, I'm an outsider and I'm not a native, so I don't know the full depth.
I would love
of the
to
concept.
learn more about that.
I would love, I think it's a very beautiful concept that I'd love to understand more of. But that's something where Native American culture has created space to talk about different ways of doing life and seeing the world, but it's not stigmatized.
Right.
And then speaking for other cultures, like for example, again, identify as Filipino. So Asian cultures, a lot of times they have a tendency to see mental health related problems as a source of shame.
In Rwanda, mental health is it's a stigma. Like literally, if you have any issues with mental health, if you have mental health problems, they consider you as a crazy person. And even after genocide, when we went through genocide, it's normal to have people are traumatized, but still,
of course,
it's stigmatized.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really great point, which is this conflict that makes no sense, right? So one of the things we know is that half of all people will experience a major mental health disorder at some point in their adult lives or some point in their lives. Half of all people. And on the other hand, we treat mental health challenges as if they happen to 1% of people, and it's just the freaks or just the people who can't control themselves. And I think that messaging, those facts don't fit together.
They're not even helping to that person who's going through mental health issues.
Exactly. So, when you talk about Rwanda and trauma, trauma is so debilitating and so difficult. For us to see that as a personal failure is such a sad thing, to think that we're hurting people almost twice. First, they're having to deal with a trauma and mental illness, and then secondly, they're being stigmatized for it. It's just so heartbreaking.
Yeah, and in my experience growing up, my parents were always very supportive with a lot of like emotional stuff that my brother or myself were going through at the time. But and I don't mean to talk down on anybody, but it's just kind of the way that my parents or their parents' generation kind of grew up. Like mental health, it's not a tangible thing. It's not like a cut on your arm that you can't just wrap it in a bandage and say, okay, you're fine now. It's something that I've had a lot of conversations with older people, with uncles, with people from that generation, and it took a lot of, and I don't even want to say convincing, but a lot of discussion, a lot of conversation to kind of make it click in their minds. Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, of course, because they can relate to it. Everybody can, of course, relate to mental or emotional pain, but they don't really categorize it in the same way that a broken arm is. Yeah. And it takes certain, I don't know, it's like a trick you have to play with your mind almost to kind of make it a legitimate thing.
But that makes me go to the question, because you grew up in Filipino family culture, and then you did not become the doctor, fixing the arms, the legs, or whatever, the stomach, or a lawyer, and you become the therapist. You're still a doctor. You tricked them a little bit. you were a therapist. What inspired you? What motivated you to follow this passion of your? I call it a passion because I see how you do it. It's something that is close to your heart. So what made you do it?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, I'm laughing because you're making me think back to when I was, I think, a freshman in college, and taking my first, I think it was pre-calc maybe, and just, oh guys, I could barely make it through that class. And I just kept thinking, if this is a prereq for pre-med, I'm just never gonna make it.
It's not happening.
And math is just the worst for me. And what it actually happened was I was double majoring, I think, in mass communications and pre-med, and one of my mass comm prerequisites was a Psych 101 class. And I took Psych 101, and honestly, it was like an aha moment, like the world opened up, because when I realized this profession of, being a mental health professional, of being a psychologist, I couldn't believe that people could get paid to talk to people all day. I was like, that is what I love. I mean, I would do that for free. And it didn't even feel like work. So that's how I knew that probably this is something for me. And that's really what it feels like. I mean, sometimes people say, like, I don't know how you do it, listening to people's problems all day. I get that a lot. Yeah. And, it can be really difficult to hear the hard things that people suffer through. But truthfully, I find getting to walk alongside people and see them overcome so energizing and grounding. And I can have a bad day, and then I'll sit down and work with clients, and my day gets better, Yeah. Oh, wow. So I feel so grateful, because I truly feel like I'm doing what I feel like I was uniquely gifted to do, just because I love connecting and talking to people. I can do it all day long. Yeah. And Dydine, my background is in ministry, and ministry is very similar. I mean, it's almost identical in some ways. I remember having you do a lot of coffees with people when you work in ministry. And I was like, this is so similar to therapy. I'm literally just talking to people all day about their lives, and I really, really love it. So I that's remember, kind of the
I remember
story.
We were sitting in AJ's car one of the times, and you were kind of the therapist in the car, because we sat in that car for hours.
I have to say, I've probably had many similar late night conversations in cars with people. It is something I'm known to do.
It was helpful. It's amazing to have that call. Well, when I grow up, that's one I'm hoping to do. When I grow up, I want to.
Is that right? When you grew up? I love that. I love that.
So how does a person maintain a healthy mindset during this coronavirus crisis?
Thanks for asking. I mean, I think it's a question a lot of people are trying to wrap their minds around. How do we handle such a unimaginably difficult thing? And so I have kind of 4 points that I think might be, I hope are helpful for people who are struggling with their mental health at this time. So the first one is realistic expectations. And this is kind of like what we were talking about earlier. So many people started this quarantine time and they were like, I'm going to write my first novel. I'm going to lose 15 pounds and get a 6-pack or an 8-pack. You know, just they felt like this quarantine time was a vacation. It's not a vacation, right? There are people who are struggling to keep food on the table. There are families that are now having to turn into their kids' teachers at home while they're working a job full time and feed everyone and keep everybody okay. And, you know, this is just unthinkably difficult. So I think the very first thing is have realistic expectations of yourself and of others, because in the middle of a pandemic, what's reasonable to expect and what's an accomplishment is, did you get up? Did you eat something? Maybe you showered today, you know, call someone that you cared about. Just the small things that help us be okay. That's a realistic expectation and a good thing to have.
Absolutely.
Any more than that is just frosting, just extra great stuff. If you have it, if you can, you know, recreate your podcast, make it better. Awesome, good for you.
Yeah.
But that shouldn't be the expectation.
No.
Okay.
No, absolutely not.
The second point is routine. And I can't emphasize this enough. Having just some plan for your day and your week can really, really help. I know it doesn't seem like it would, but when we wake up and in the morning we don't feel a sense of purpose or like, here are some things I need to do today, it can really mess with your mental health. So when I talk about routine, I'm not talking about planning out every hour of your day, but you know, some things to consider. Wake up and go to bed at the same time. It takes a little work, right? But just trying your best to have a little bit of consistency can really do wonders for your health. This, you know, a lot of people aren't sleeping very well right now. And so having that routine where you go to bed at the same time, you put your phone away, your screens away, you know, can really make a difference in terms of how much you're sleeping. And then, you know, getting some physical activity in is a great thing to integrate in your routine. But it doesn't have to be a lot. You know, maybe it's that you call your folks once a week on Sundays. But having a few things to write down every day in your calendar and actually writing them down, I do really recommend that. Is great. And if you need, you know, a little kickstart, think of your day as being divided into 3 sections. You got your morning, your afternoon, and your evening. And just start with creating one plan for each section. So maybe in the morning, you're like, I'll cook myself breakfast. And in the afternoon, you say, I'm going to take a walk. And in the evening, you say, I'm going to shower. That can be a great start to a routine. And then you can build off of that as you find that you're able to. Okay, so that's 2.
Yes.
And then the third point is relationships. And this is pretty much like a no-brainer. But you during this time of self-quarantine, we have to be connected to others and to people. It doesn't have to be 5 Zoom calls a day. I know some people are getting burned out about all the calls that they have. But having some points of human connection outside of your household, you know, being reminded that people care about you, that you're valuable, being in conversations where you can feel seen and heard. We as humans really need that. We can't go too long without it. So we need relationships.
Yeah. We were talking about that. Even if you're an introvert, even if you're an introvert, you still need that human connection. Yeah. Like I'm an introvert, but I still, a few days later, I'm like, okay, I need some friends. Where are those great friends?
Even if it's like, you know, a 20-minute conversation with a friend, it's so rejuvenating.
Yes, and introverts need people too, right? So being an introvert means you recharge by being alone, but it doesn't mean you need to be alone for the rest of your life, right?
No, you cannot keep recharging your entire life. You overflow your batteries.
And then I have one more point when it comes to maintaining a healthy mindset, and it's optimism. So it's easy to focus on the negatives. It's easy to watch the news all day long or scroll on social media all day long. But to really be focused on positive content is really helpful. And I love the difference between optimism and positivity, because positivity doesn't see the negatives, whereas optimism can see the negatives and the challenges, but chooses to be hopeful anyway. And so to remain optimistic is so helpful for your mental health. So it doesn't mean you have to see everything as all roses or rainbows and whatever, rainbows and unicorns. But to see that tomorrow, there's going to be a better day in the future, and that things will get better.
Purposely maneuver your brain, your ears and eyes to hear and watch those positive
and you can
things.
Yeah, you condition yourself to be positive, to look out. What's that? I forgot. It's a phrase that means you're like you predispose yourself to just look out for certain things. I forgot. I forgot what it was. But
there's one that's coming to my mind, which is what informs you forms you. So the stuff that you take in shapes who you are, and so be really careful about what you take in.
Yeah, absolutely. You see, when you're watching news, or it's even let's even say you're listening to a sad story or watching a sad movie. That sad movie would literally make you cry. So that's how your emotions. So if you choose to look out for great things and things that lighter and inspires you, you will then have those feelings as well. I took a meditation class a few years ago. I was in a journey, on my healing journey, transformational classes, meditation classes, reading self-help books. And
we've all been there, Dydine. It's not just you.
I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that my life took me to that, to that path to be able to see, hey, I need this. I need to heal myself so I can be able to give, but I remember in that class, my meditation teacher said something about, if you decide, just as a person, you decide, like you said earlier, in the morning, you say, I'm going to make myself breakfast. I'm going to have a walk in the afternoon, and then I'm going to take a shower in the evening. And then, so you decide that, and you do it for a whole year. And another person decides, when I wake up, I'm going to cry about everything that's not working in my life. In the afternoon, I'm going to, in everything negative, and then they do it for a whole year. Those people, even if they had the same health conditions at the same time they started, at the end of the year, they will have different results on their health conditions. So, so it's important to know, okay, you have what you're consuming is going to shape who you are physically, emotionally, everything.
And what you focus on, right? So you're actually reminding me of, I just shared this on Instagram today, the concept of, do you make your pain more painful?
Oh, I saw that painful? Already. I'm not a stalker.
But for example, you take an experience that's universally viewed as unpleasant, like driving in traffic. And, in scenario A, you're driving in traffic and you just kick and scream the whole time. You're cursing, you're just trying to weave through traffic to get to your destination, and you get there late because there's traffic, and that's one experience. In the second scenario, you recognize there's going to be traffic, so what do? Well, maybe you put on a mindfulness tape and you do some driving meditation, or maybe you listen to your favorite album, or you call your best friend and you decide to have that opportunity to get on the phone with your best friend. You also arrive late, same unpleasant experience, but if you look at it just by comparing scenario A and B, in scenario A, well, let's just say the pain of being in traffic is like a 5 out of 10 pain points.
Yes.
Right? But in the first scenario, when you're kicking and screaming the whole time and resisting, your actual pain that you feel might be 7 or 8 out of 10.
Absolutely.
Whereas in the second scenario,
it's a 3
it's
or
maybe
2.
a 4 or 3 out of 10, right?
Yeah.
Same experience, but you've made your pain more painful in the first scenario, and you make your pain less painful in the second.
Absolutely. A while back when I met Alex, he used to wear his hats that says "I don't mind." His T-shirts "I don't mind," and I'm like, "What is that? I don't mind." And he said, "Oh, it's if I have mental health, if I have any depression or anything, I don't mind having it. Like having that."
Yeah.
Like I don't know. Like,
well, yeah, it's a company that it's like a mental health
advocacy.
Advocacy, yeah, that's right. Called I Don't Mind, and I have a T-shirt, I got a water bottle, got a hat about it. I guess I'm really into talking about your feelings, talking about if you have any issues, any tough things, like we're all talking about. Yeah. So that's what you're talking about.
Yeah,
and that's so needed, especially for communities of color as well. If I can just say that, because people of color have historically had so little opportunity, little space to have permission for their struggles, especially in mental health. One of my friends, who is also just a hero, who I love, her name is Dr. Joy. She has a community on Instagram called Therapy for Black Girls. And she started this little account, and it turned into a movement. Like, I don't even know how many followers she has now, but it's so inspiring, because the one thing you see for folks who are creating communities like this, there are many now, is how needed the conversation is, and how much we need permission to be open about our struggles, especially in mental health as people of color, because, especially for people who have experienced prejudice and systemic racism and all sorts of awful, horrible things and unfairnesses in the world, there's a lot that can impact your mental health. And I'm super grateful to you, as a man of color, also just as a male, because men have an even harder time, I think, sometimes talking about mental health stuff. So I appreciate you using your voice to create more space for that. We need it.
Absolutely.
And that's another thing we're trying to accomplish with this podcast, is just to create the dialogue and to create a safe space to have that dialogue.
No, because when we're growing up, your brothers are not allowed to cry. They're not allowed, they have to man up, so
exactly. Things like man up are so damaging.
I know,
that's a whole other podcast right there, but
but they don't say woman up, so so it's amazing that and as you were saying about mental health for people of color, or people who went through these injustices and a lot of horrible things, most of the times they don't have means, or they don't have means to be able to get to the therapist, to even know that the therapist is there. There's because mostly the people who go through those things, their lives changes drastically, because the society is putting them down, and everything is just chaotic. What would be the advice for you?
I wish I could give you one sentence that would solve all those problems.
Yes.
And unfortunately, with systemic issues, they are very pervasive. So, the problems exist in many layers and many spaces, and it takes each and every one of us to do something about it. But I do have some thoughts. And my first thought, actually, I want to start with a quote that you reminded me of. And I think this quote is really powerful. It's a quote by Viktor Frankel, and it was in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankel is just beloved in the mental health community. So this book is kind of like one of those golden books. So here's a quote.
Yes.
An abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal behavior. And I'll say it again. An abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal behavior. In other words, if the world is pushing you down, if everything you experience is discrimination and being underestimated and being made small, then of course you're going to have
an abnormal
reaction to that.
So
it's not even abnormal, because that's the normal response to an abnormal situation. So I bring that up because it's important for us to start having conversations about how having challenges with mental health is completely normal in this world. And I think just normalizing and destigmatizing mental health creates more space because we give each other permission to actually talk about it. So, not all of us can start an advocacy organization and a fashion line that's about mental health. But, I know that when you talk about it, when you say, hey, I care about these things, or I've struggled with these things, I know that it gives, me, your neighbor, your friend, inspiration to say, okay, I can share my struggles. Yeah. It gives me permission. It gives me a sense of feeling like I'm not alone. I'm not so bad, I'm just because I'm struggling with these things.
Right.
So I think on an individual basis, about our struggles is very powerful. And then I think on a bigger scale, we need advocates, and we need advocates in individuals, and we need advocates in organizations. So I'm grateful that there's a lot of people fighting the fight to make sure that mental health is being addressed for communities of color. I actually just saw recently that Beyonce donated a ton of money with her foundation to help people get mental health access, I think in her hometown.
Houston?
Atlanta, maybe? Houston?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's somewhere, it's multiple cities, in the South and whatnot. So, so she's
amazing.
using her money and saying, I want to create space for people to heal. I love that.
That's amazing. Wow.
She's great.
Especially in the southern country or southern states.
Yeah.
That's important.
Oh, yeah.
And somewhere out there, someone's saying, well, if Beyonce can talk about this, I can talk about it, right?
Yeah.
I know. Hey, she's fun. She's talking about it. She's all right. She's still rocking the world. Why not?
Yeah. And actually, just to say, I think a lot of celebrities have actually taken the mantle of speaking up more openly about mental health. Lady Gaga, Demi Lovato, The Rock, Ellen DeGeneres. A lot of folks have used their voice to share.
Yeah, it is really important. That's really amazing that who else does that? I think, how did you find out I Don't Mind? It was because of one of the celebrities.
So I'm a big fan of that show, The Flash, on the CW. And the lead actor, Grant Gustin, I think I saw on his Instagram, he was wearing I Don't Mind. I was like, oh, wow. The Flash is wearing I Don't Mind, and I'm trying to do The Flash at some point. I'm an actor, by the way. That's why I'm out here doing
I saw that. Super cool. I have to say, I'm a Marvel girl, but I have a lot of respect for anything that's in the superhero world.
Yeah.
And my good friend Chris Williams is Black Lightning, so he's also representing.
Great. But yes. So I mean, all these celebrities, all these actors, people with voices and bigger platforms are now indeed speaking about mental health.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. We needed them
we
too.
We do need it.
Because
your brain is everything, And if we all have a functioning brain, then the world really will have less chaos,
who cares about having a six-pack if you don't love yourself? Who cares about having perfect teeth if you don't want to live another day? None of those things matter at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Do you see a lot of people committing suicide, and you're looking at their lives from the outside view, you're like, oh, everything looks perfect. The career is going well. Everything is going well. I have so many friends, this and this and this. They have so much money. They have perfect teeth, like you said. They are handsome or beautiful, you idolize them. And then in the morning, you hear that they decided to end their lives, which means their mental health hasn't been taken care of. So
Robin Williams, he's the one that shocked me so much, right? He seemed happy, right? And so it just shows you that depression is so pervasive, and I think we do spend a lot of energy sometimes trying to hide it. And it stops people from getting the help that they so desperately need.
Absolutely.
I don't know if
what is it
about telemental health practice. Is that kind of the same thing that you were talking about, and bringing your therapy and mental health online? Is that what?
So here, I'm about to make you feel a whole lot better, because it's just a fancy word for online therapy.
Okay.
It just means that what we typically do in an office face to face with our clients, I'm doing online with folks, and I've
okay,
found a way
okay.
to do that. So
Yeah, and do you expect it to be more common? Because you hear a lot about when the quarantine is over, when the virus has been, or when it's over, that a lot of like work from home jobs are now going to be the new norm. Like people aren't necessarily going to want to go back to the office, but still work from home. Do you expect the same thing to be happening with your field?
I do. I really do. I mean, I think companies will start to realize that they can do similar things without having to have the physical office space and reduce their budget. So I think there's practical reasons. I think I think the freedom of being able to practice online is great. I mean, my commute is 3 feet, right, from my bed to my desk. It's a great commute.
It is.
And because I practice this way, I mean, I want to emphasize it's not just that it's convenient. It actually is great for my well-being and mental health, and that allows me to serve my clients better. Yeah. So, it's wonderful that I can pick my own schedule. It's great that I can, quickly make myself lunch in the middle of a day. It's really a very freeing way to do life. And I think my clients experience the benefits of me having a life that I love.
Yeah. I was also, I was thinking about that too. Like you are giving, like you're a therapist, you're listening, you're giving, but how do you get your time to be listened to, to fill up your cup, how
great question. How do I fill up my cup? I mean, a lot of therapists are in therapy. I have in and out been in therapy, so I definitely, I'm a huge fan, and I don't just provide it, I also receive it.
Great.
I mentioned those mentors earlier. My mentors are huge to me. I try to stay really in contact with my friends because as a total extrovert, I need that social connection to feel alive and to feel okay.
Yes.
And I am really a stickler for my self-care. So I've learned over the years, I used to be a people pleaser. I think I'm a recovering people pleaser now. But I've learned to say no to things.
Perfect.
I've learned to protect my space that I need for care. And so if something is too difficult for me or will stress me out, I say no.
Yeah, perfect.
And I say no to a lot of things,
Yes.
just because I can't do everything, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a beautiful thing because most people, I can be that way. I can be a people pleaser easily, and definitely learning how to say no, how to even detach from wrong friends, all those toxic relationships, like knowing how to protect yourself so you can be able to give, this Therese that we have here. It's important. And
yes,
it is really important.
Healthy boundaries are everything, you guys.
They are.
I didn't even know what boundaries were growing up, and now I talk about them about 5 million times a day. But we sometimes grow up not being given permission to ever get to say no to things. We just do what we're told, and that's quite damaging at times because we need to be able to say no to some things so we can say yes to the right things. So having healthy boundaries is really everything, and when it comes to mental health, they're absolutely essential.
They are.
What are a few things that lights up your heart whenever you get to do those things or see those things? What are those things?
Well, I mentioned earlier, I love cooking. So my favorite thing is getting to cook food that is for people I love and that they enjoy.
Yes.
So that's always something that brings me energy and joy. On a smaller scale, in this day and age when there's so much negativity in the world, I love good puppy memes or baby gifs or gifs or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
If it's something that's lighthearted and cute and adorable, if there's puppies and babies together, I'm all about that. I love a good meme. Those things can really lighten the mood.
He's good with memes. I'm not.
Love them.
I mean, their language all
he has a
themselves.
meme for everything, everything.
Yeah, some of my friends, we just communicate in memes, and we get it.
I think if there was a superhero that your superhero power was memes, I think that would be you.
That's fine. Let's make a show about it right now.
Meme man? I don't know.
We'll figure it out.
What else lights me up? I'm constantly inspired by inspiring people. So
Aw.
when I see that someone's creating a movement or starting something, or when we look at Greta Thunberg, who did the whole environmental movement, just turned it upside down. Getting to see people like that lights me up and inspires me to be better, because I feel like I still feel like a novice in life. I still feel very much like I'm a beginner in learning.
I know.
And so I love when people have this attitude of like they can do anything and be anything, and that can solve the world's problems. And I have my little corner of the world that I try to put a positive influence on. But sometimes it can feel overwhelming and daunting, and I have so many messages in my head like you can't do it or it's too big. So I'm very lit up by people who are just doing life in an inspiring, amazing way, making changes, disrupting things, and doing it in just a way where it almost like fear doesn't factor in for them. I know they have fear, but they just do it anyway. And so those people really inspire me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, taking that leap of faith of being a nomad therapist, those type of.
Thanks. Thank you. I mean, I like people who see things outside the box or out of the box, because I think I see things a little bit out of the box.
You do.
And the world needs people like that.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely. So what is one change you would love to see in the world?
Just one?
Okay, how many would you like to share?
Okay,
and then
I'll
say
share
the top
in
one.
as concise a way as I possibly
Yeah.
can.
Okay.
My personal passion is wanting to see every person live their life in the truth that they are extremely important in the world, that they feel known and they feel seen and they feel loved. And that's extremely important to me because, Dydine, as you know, I lost my brother 10 years ago who died by suicide. And it's something that really impacts, the work that I do and why I want to help people. And so it's so important to me that people see that they're valued and they're loved, and that they recognize that they are a gift and their lives are a gift. So many people, I think, because of the things they've gone through that are no fault of their own, have lost connection with their own value and worth. So that's extremely important to me. I would love to see that people actually love their lives, that they have more good days and bad days. And I think part of getting there is that I would love to see every single person who needs mental health support get it. And that's a tall order, but I completely believe it's possible. And it's something that I'm trying to help, a problem I'm trying to help solve in my lifetime. So obviously it's a big dream and a big goal, but to me, it's the most important thing I can do with my time and energy. So even if I fail, at least I tried my best.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you so much, Therese.
Thanks for listening to that episode, folks. This one was really needed, given what we're all going through, and it was truly a blessing to be able to have Therese on the show today.
I just literally started asking questions for me, I have a confession.
What's that?
I've never been to therapy.
Oh, no, neither have I, but I thought about it a lot.
And I was like, oh my God, this is my chance.
Well, if Therese, you're listening, thank you so much.
And she makes it so easy.
Yeah. And guys, if you want to follow Therese and kind of get behind what she's about, you can go to her website or Instagram at exploringtherapy.com or at exploringtherapy on Instagram and social media. And you can become a community member with Therese.
Yeah.
And guys, also, we are on YouTube now. Yeah, we're on YouTube now. We are putting the interviews on YouTube, but it's just going to be the audio with a couple of pictures that are representative of the interviews that we did. But starting with Therese's interview, we're going to have a Zoom call footage, and then I'm going to try to figure that out as our resident tech guy. But please look forward to that. And we're hoping to grow that platform as well.
Yeah, please subscribe and give us a follow, a comment, ask us questions, and just support us.
So guys, until next time, please stay tuned to the next episode and make sure to check us out on YouTube, like and subscribe.
Stay tuned.